All right, let's dive right in. Ancient Greece, well, boy, getting this deep dive ready was intense. I mean, talk about a journey. Chronology, politics, society, culture, you name it, we got it.
Quite the treasure trove, right? So much more than just dates and names.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the first things that struck me was how we tend to think of ancient Greece as this big, unified empire. But that's not really accurate, is it? These sources paint a different picture.
It's a common misconception. The reality is far more, shall we say, fragmented. Hundreds of independent city-states, each with its own personality, its own ambitions. Imagine a whole map dotted with these vibrant hubs of civilization, all doing their own thing. Changes the whole game, doesn't it?
Like a music festival instead of a solo act.
Yeah.
Each city-state with its own unique sound. So what led to this fragmentation? I mean, were they just naturally inclined to be independent, or was there something else going on?
Well, let's not discount good old-fashioned geography. Think about it. Mountains, valleys, a coastline that looks like it was drawn by a toddler with a crayon. These natural barriers made it pretty tough to unite under one banner.
Can you imagine trying to conquer a bunch of city-states when you can't even get a decent messenger pigeon service going?
Exactly. Communication was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So you've got these isolated communities developing their own customs, their own systems of government. It's a recipe for, well, a lot of independent city-states.
Right. Makes you wonder how they ever managed to even think of themselves as Greeks at all with all that separation.
But they did. Shared culture, language, religion. These things run deep. Think of it like a big loud family, always bickering amongst themselves, but fiercely loyal when it counts.
And you really see that reflected in their culture, don't you? The Olympics, the epic poetry, there's this thread of Greekness woven through it all. It's fascinating. Makes you wonder if we see anything similar today.
Oh, absolutely. Think about cultural identities versus political boundaries in our modern world. But we'll circle back to that. Let's get back to ancient Greece for now. Because all this talk about independent city-states, it begs the question, how did they handle the whole power sharing thing? Or, more accurately, not sharing power.
Right, because even with a shared cultural identity, I imagine things could get a little competitive, let's say, between those city-states. Competitive, you think? I think that's putting it mildly. But you were saying something about how power was or wasn't shared before we got sidetracked by those modern comparisons.
Oh, right. So picture this. Early ancient Greece, many of these city-states, they start out as mini-kingdoms, right? One ruler, top dog, calling all the shots. Simple enough.
Makes sense.
But over time, things start to shift. Power, it gravitates, towards small groups of families, the wealthy ones, of course. Think aristocracy, but like oligarchy style.
Okay, so instead of one ruler, you've got a handful of powerful families. Not exactly a giant leap forward for, equality and all that.
No, not exactly a worker's paradise. And as you might imagine, this whole oligarchy thing, it led to its fair share of tension. Instability, even.
Because not everyone was thrilled about being ruled by the rich and powerful. I'm shocked. Tell me more.
Well, let's just say the average Greek citizen wasn't exactly thrilled with being told what to do by some exclusive club. And that's where things take a turn for the, shall we say, interesting.
I love a good plot twist. What happened? Did someone finally stand up and say, enough is enough to these oligarchies?
You could say that. And the real star of this show,
Athens.
Athens, really?
Oh, yeah. They went through this wild period of just intense turmoil, experimenting with different forms of government, even dabbling in a bit of tyranny along the way.
Wait a minute. I thought we were done with the whole one ruler thing.
It was more of a phase, really, a temporary solution to a very pressing problem. But it shows just how desperate they were for stability, for change. And you know what they say about desperate times?
They call for desperate measures. Exactly. And in the case of Athens, those desperate measures paved the way for something truly revolutionary, something that would change the course of history.
Don't tell me. Democracy.
Bingo. Right there in your notes in all its messy, complicated glory. After all that upheaval, the Athenians took a radical step. They decided, hey, why not give power to the people?
Hold on. Are we talking about the actual birth of democracy here? Like the real deal? In Athens.
You got it. Now, it wasn't a perfect system, not by a long shot. Women, slaves, foreigners, they were all excluded from the party. Big time.
Yeah, power to the people comes with a lot of asterisks back then. But still, to create a system like that, way back then, It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And it wasn't just some, flash in the pan. Athenian democracy, it flourished for centuries, leaving its mark on, well, pretty much everything that came after it.
It makes you wonder, what was it about Athens? What made them the democracy trailblazers?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because it's not like the other city-states were just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Speaking of which, while Athens was busy inventing democracy, what were those Spartan folks up to?
Oh, yeah, the Spartans. Those guys were in a whole other league. I can't imagine them holding elections every other Tuesday, can you?
Sparta. They were a different breed. While Athens was all about that democratic life, Sparta doubled down on tradition, order, and an almost, a fanatical devotion to military might.
Right. The Spartans were hardcore. One of these articles, I think it's the one on Spartan education, it talks about this brutal system they put their kids through, the agoge. Starting at age 7, boys were taken from their families and thrown into this military boot camp. Intense.
Talk about tough love, huh? While Athenian kids were off debating philosophy and writing plays, Spartan boys were learning one thing: how to be warriors.
Such a stark contrast, isn't it? Two completely different approaches to, well, pretty much everything. And get this, they even had a system of dual kings.
2 kings?
2 kings. Can you believe that?
I mean, talk about a power struggle waiting to happen. How did that even work?
Right. Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Apparently, it was all about balance. Checks and balances, Spartan style. These kings, they weren't all powerful, not by a long shot. They shared power with a council of elders. And then you had these officials called ephors, keeping an eye on things, making sure no one got any funny ideas.
So it's like they designed their entire society around, control, order. Even their art reflects that, right? Very disciplined, very austere. A world away from the elaborate sculptures and pottery you see coming out of Athens.
Absolutely. You're spot on. It's easy to get caught up in the Athenian narrative, the democracy, the philosophy, the art. But Sparta, they remind us that ancient Greece wasn't some kind of monolithic entity. It was a tapestry of different ideologies, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending, but always fascinating.
It makes you realize how much we tend to, simplify history, doesn't it? We grab onto these big, bold ideas, democracy, Spartan warriors, but the reality, as always, is so much more complex.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
But hey, before we get too lost in the nuances of Spartan society, there's a whole other side of ancient Greece we haven't even touched on yet. And that, my friend, is their mind-blowing culture.
Yes. From philosophy to the arts, this is where ancient Greece truly shines.
It blew my mind when I got to this section in the research. Seriously, the political drama, that was all well and good. But their cultural achievements, that's where things got really interesting. It's like ancient Greece was firing on all cylinders, culturally speaking. But it's not just how much they accomplished, it's the impact,
Oh, absolutely. We're still feeling the aftershocks today, thousands of years later. Just think about it. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. These weren't just big names back then. Their ideas, they became the foundation for so much of Western thought.
It's true. And even outside of philosophy, the sheer breadth of their achievements is astounding.
And you can draw a direct line from their innovations to so much of what we take for granted today.
So are you saying that by studying ancient Greece, we're not just learning about some old civilization? We're tracing the roots of our own world. It's kind of like holding up a mirror, right?
Precisely. And it makes you wonder what our own legacy will be. What will future historians say about us? Thousands of years from now, what will be the lasting echoes of our time? Something to ponder, isn't it?
I'd say so. Wow, what a deep dive this has been. I always learn so much from these conversations.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this journey through ancient Greece. Until next time.